So let's take it home. And there are two more things that we're going to discuss. The first one is appropriate to what has been happening over the last couple of weeks. So at the beginning of this discussion, Tammy and Dumi detailed quite extensively the two prominent cases of gender-based violence that have occurred over the last couple of days and weeks in South Africa: the murder of the 6 women in KZN and the murder of a 19-year-old student from Wits University, Asatandi, and how, just barbaric and unnecessary that was. I want us to, because every time something like this happens, and you guys have correctly pointed this out earlier on, there are always sound bites, the same old sound bites that we see on social media, the same outrage that we see on social media. But I think the one thing that a lot of people aren't focusing on is how mental health plays into forming men like that. Because a lot of the time we always talk about, violence, all of, men are violent, patriarchy, misogyny. Let's bring it back home and speak about how particularly mental health and the failure to check mental health, not only in ourselves, but in other men around us, leads to instances of gender-based violence, and an instance where a man could kill 6 women in a matter of weeks. I found this quite interesting because when I've watched a couple of documentaries on Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was the infamous serial killer in America. And in his death row interviews and other interviews, Ted Bundy could detail the day he started seeing women as a piece of property, as an object, right? And funny enough, he details it to the first day. I think he looked at a Playboy magazine or something like that, and how from then on, because that was unchecked, it was just him viewing and being like, oh, they're property, they're objects. And it festered into this unchecked and unhealthy relationship with sex, and unchecked, unhealthy relationship with ownership over women, and spiraled into gender-based violence, which he witnessed in his own household as well. So it's weird how someone like Ted Bundy, who killed all of those women in America, can trace back to the event that first made him see women in a particular way, and how it spiraled into other mental health issues that made him the most infamous serial killer of the 20th century. So let's just very briefly discuss how it is that mental health and those very tiny events that we oftentimes ignore in the lives of men lead to men committing gender-based violence and ultimately killing women. So I think we can start with you, Dumi, and then we'll move on to Tammy.
Yeah. So I think I'm glad that you framed. I think it's important to where necessary frame gender-based violence in the context of mental health, because I think I think the reason we shy away from it is because we don't want to give perpetrators excuses, right? Because we see very, very often mental health being used as an excuse for being oppressive and violent, right? We see it in the United States where, especially in court, we see in the United States where there's a mass shooting and you have this white man who's described as disturbed, and not racist, but disturbed. And we see it in court. We see it in just discursive conversations on social media. We see it all over the place, right? Where we sometimes, where we shouldn't, ascribe complexity to perpetrators who just did a bad thing. But I think a lot of the time, and that's the thing, that sometimes it's not up to us to determine whether or not, like, what the cause of that thing is, right? But I think a lot of the time, I think a huge contingent of examples of femicide are probably rooted in mental health, and the mental health of the male perpetrator, right? So I think it's important that we take very, very seriously locating gender-based violence inside mental health, right? But I think just like Tanya said earlier, we're people who especially men in South Africa, if we take what masculinity is and how it's conceived in the South African context. And it means being strong, being a provider, being, having the ability to protect your family and all of these things. And I think in a world that's progressing, and in a world where women are taking their own empowerment, you have a lot of instances where, like we all said, men feel they can't meet up to the patriarchal burdens that we impose on ourselves and we impose on others, right? And a lot of the time that takes a significant toll on our mental health, like you guys have both spoken about, and even myself, that manifests in shame, right? And like Tammy said earlier, when you mix that shame with the reality that the only emotion we're allowed to feel is anger, then of course we're going to act out violently. It's the only outlet we have.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's important. I think it's important to realize that I hate to continuously harp on about this, but that it's the small things that we do and the small things that inform how we navigate the world that contributes to gender-based violence. Just like we said in previous discussions, that it's the small, seemingly innocent ways that we relate to women, being the stepping stones to gender-based violence and femicide. Again, in this case, it is mental health that's allowed to exist unfettered that is the stepping stone to femicide, right? Especially if we're going to act out violently. So I think all I can do is implore men to take their mental health seriously. And I think it doesn't like you said, Tammy, it doesn't always require seeking out a therapist or psychiatrist. That would obviously be optimal, but find a space where you can have conversations like this one. Seek out conversations like this one, even if you're not an active participant, but just seek out people who are sharing their experiences in a way that can give you the language to understand your own experiences before you resort to reacting violently in the way you relate to women. But yeah, man, just quickly, that's it for me. It's just that it's if a friend of mine once spoke about how just how much she fears insecure men, and I wasn't sure what she meant by fears. I thought like what seeming when you think of an insecure man, you think of a weak one, right? But then the more we spoke, the more I realized that an insecure man is a man who can do violent things. So yeah, it's really, really important to get a handle on the ways you're unkind to yourself before you start being unkind to other people.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Dewey. Tammy, can you just briefly share with us as well how it is that mental health, especially unchecked mental health, has led to a country, because it's clear that this is no longer an issue of individual men in Joburg or in Cape Town or in Durban or in Lagos or Accra or Birmingham, or it's clearly a global issue of linked to patriarchy, a system invented by men and maintained by men. Please just bring it back home for us and link it to how, at a mass scale, the mass ignoring of mental health for men leads to the mass butchering of women and the mass assault of women as a result of the structure that just is unchecked. So can you please just speak to us on that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can now.
Can you hear me, James?
Yeah?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
I think we might have lost Tammy there for a moment. Tammy, are you there? Okay. I think in the meantime, it's fine. In the meantime, I'll just cover what I was going to say regarding mental health and femicide. It's weird because I like how you framed it, Dumi, when you said oftentimes we're afraid to ascribe mental health issues to being the reason behind a lot of the crimes that we see in society. And your framing on America was quite strong because no one wants to attribute Dylan Roof killing all of those Black people in that church to mental health. And it's weird. I remember couple of years ago, this is when my own view of the criminal justice system started changing slightly. Of course, men who assault and murder women absolutely belong behind bars. So what I'm about to say now doesn't have to do with absolving those men of responsibilities. What I'm about to say now has to do with before those men even get to that position, right, where they assault and murder women. So I'm speaking to the men who haven't committed those actions at all. And I remember reading somewhere about how South Africa has a shortage of 34,000 police officers. This is about 7 years back, but we have a shortage of about 50,000 social workers. And what this article was trying to point out was the fact that really, firstly, we should be hiring those additional 34 police officers. However, the real problem lies in the fact that there aren't enough social workers. There aren't enough psychologists in South Africa. And so this idea has informed my opinion on the criminal justice system and where we ought to be putting our resources to. It's one of the reasons why when you're discussing drug policy, right, or the war on drugs in America or drug policy in South Africa, it's not enough to say we should send cops to the house of a drug addict or a drug user. Yes, to the drug dealer and to the criminal organizations behind that, but the drug user, more oftentimes than not, would have been helped by the presence of a social worker before they even started using drugs, or by the presence of a psychologist after they started using drugs, and not necessarily a police officer. And I think the same goes for the way that we groom men in society today. Those social workers and psychologists are absolutely needed, especially for men who haven't gotten to that position where they've assaulted and murdered. And in an instance where we can prevent another assaulter and a murderer from being groomed, let's start making those interventions. But Tammy is back online. So Tammy, I just want to speak to us about this issue of unchecked mental health and how it translates itself to a broader societal level.
Yeah. Look, sorry about that. I think it's important to draw a link between the mental health and psychological well-being of men with the death of women. And why is that so intricately linked? Like it's good that we're speaking about mental health, and it's good that we're speaking about getting more social workers, etc., and all of that could really help. But why is it that the most common feature, especially in the male community, is inflicting violence on women? And I think it's an inherent belief that women, like women are born to serve us and to serve our needs as men. That their existence in all its complexity, all its humanness, and all its purpose can be reduced to servitude of men.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, what happens is that when we are sick in our minds, right, we expect them to heal us, either, if we are aware enough to the fact that we need healing in our own minds, we'd expect them to nurse us, as we've been saying over and over, or to heal us in ways that are extremely toxic and are indicative of our lack of awareness of our own mental health issues. So for example, because I am sick in the head right now and I'm down and I've had a shitty day, you better make me feel good by having sex with me tonight. You better make me feel good by making sure my dinner is prepared. You better, like, I've had a shitty day at work, right? So you better not contribute to that shitty day by giving me mouth. Like, don't be mouthy with me today. You're the last person that can be mouthy with me. Everyone has been mouthy with me. You're the last person that has the license to be mouthy with.
Yeah.
You know, and it boils down to that. Like Bessie Head, I'm just paraphrasing her, but like, you know, she says every man has his beast. You know, and she speaks about how there's a hierarchy of oppression, and a hierarchy of marginalization. And this hierarchy, this domino, the last domino to fall is the woman, with all of these dominoes stacked on top of her. And we are the domino before the one that falls on the woman. Because we inherently believe that women are here to serve us and to serve our needs and to serve the needs of our fathers and to serve the needs of our sons and our friends who are men. Shout out to Erica Badu and Tyrone, right? Because that's that whole culture, right? Where you, the woman, has to serve us in this particular way, man. Like, I even know men. Let's speak about like patriarchy, like patriarching in the properly, né? I know men, bro, who would inflict violence on like who themselves, who don't work, who are struggling to earn their own income, etc., etc., etc. But you know, would expect women to jump hoops to make sure that their like carnal needs are met in terms of alcohol, clothes, and fun. And if those needs aren't met by the one who budgets and the one who makes money, which is the woman in that relationship, she's gonna bear the brunt of violence. You know, like where we manipulate even the definition of patriarchy
to suit us.
To suit us, you know, and to show that patriarchy is an entire system of that is built to suit us. Patriarchy isn't necessarily providing. It isn't necessarily protecting. It isn't necessarily all of those like seemingly noble things.
It's our ability to change the rules in real time.
In real time. And like Busi keeps speaking about this when we speak about like Nagwe and we have debates about that show, you know, and we watch the actual show and the episodes, we're like, nah, dude, like the guy gets to move the goalposts however he wants. You know what I'm saying? It's not about, you know, it's not about Isintu and the ability to be polygamous because of tradition and culture. No, it's about the ability to shift the goalposts in the house. And so that's what we need to get rid of first, that like mental health is important, but mental health, again, we need to attach political connotations to it because it has political implications on women. And what's Hana, even if you are aware of your mental health issues, that doesn't help anyone if you're not aware of how you conceive of the women in your life. If you're not aware of that, it doesn't matter if you know that you have triggers, if you know that you have chronic depression, if you know that you've been this and that has happened to you in your, that doesn't happen. It doesn't matter, right? Because the most self-aware men abuse women as much as the most ignorant men. You know, so that's why for us, you know, our goal with this mental health conversation is still to attach it to the plight of women in our hands. Because we still have to think about ourselves and our role in perpetuating misogyny and oppression and violence. First, think about that first. then proceed to think about your own self. Because that way, even if you're feeling like you're dying in the inside, no one else is going to die first.
Oh, wow.
That way, everyone
Oh, my
around
goodness.
you, like that way, everyone around you, the women in your life, right, will be safe enough to at least be there for you and help you walk your journey towards healing. Because they are safe and alive to do. And again, not to say that they are there to do the work. No, at least now you can optimize love around you. So yeah, man, that's really it, man. Like we can't link mental health from the plight of women as men. We can't do that. We can't isolate it and have the chat separately and have a caucus amongst ourselves as men and say, check yourselves, check your demons, check your this, check your that. I mean, Tory Lane shot Meg the Stallion the other day, bro. Shot her.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know. Like even if he has like the deepest demons that he's fighting inside of him, mental health issues that are severe trauma, severe this and this and that, even though those things are true, like sharp, they may be true, but what we know more glaringly is the fact that he took out a gun and shot a woman.
Yeah.
Who I think might have been intimately involved with. He took out a gun and shot her. It nullifies all the things that are happening in his head.
Yeah. Absolutely gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
Because she could have been dead.
Yeah.
Then what? Now it's gonna lead to you hanging yourself, right? Because now it's over for you. You've done the ultimate crime. Must it take ultimate crimes, man, for us to even confront one, like our relationship with women, and two, our relationship with our own minds? Nah, bro. No.
No, thank you so much for that, Tammy. I think now we can enter the final stretch of our discussion. We've already spoken at length about this last part, which is seeking help. So I just, in conclusion, I'd like you guys to give us just a very brief message to, obviously this show's for everyone who's watching, but the reason we're doing this show in particular is so that men who are having these discussions can impact other men to start thinking differently about their journey of redefining manhood. So can we all just give to the men who are watching just very brief advice about seeking help, but in particular, practical steps about seeking help for their mental health, bearing in mind that there are many impediments to seeking mental health, whether it's the culture that you live in, the amount of money that's in your wallet. So obviously not all men can afford therapy, the people around you, and whether they'll be accommodating to you being vulnerable or not, and what circles you need to find yourself in, and so on. So let's start with Tammy, and then we'll move on to Dumi, and then I'll give my bit, and we'll round off the, tonight's episode. So Tammy?
Yes. From my side, I think the most important thing is to it might be the most difficult thing to do, but I think it's you have to take a step in this direction, is to find friends that you are able to be vulnerable with. I cannot stress this enough.
So important.
I cannot stress this enough, because I said this like a couple of weeks ago. It's I think as men, we think it's okay to hang around shallow men and to be shallow.
Yeah.
We think it's okay to be shallow and hang around shallow men, and that's a problem. So find men who are progressive and who at least themselves have a faculty of vulnerability that they have tapped into, so that you can actually have a conversation with someone, that you can have a heartfelt conversation with someone about your issues. One. But also, most importantly, when you're speaking to those men and when you're finding these acquaintances, make sure that you are aligned in terms of your view on women, to be honest, because again, what we all do as men, we may find vulnerable other men we can be vulnerable with, but in that moment of vulnerability, all we are is just blaming women for the, for our just inner demons that we're fighting and whatever, and like and the lack of this and the lack of that. No, find men who are progressive and who are aligned with you with a progressive view on women. 1, 2, where you can seek help of superior counsel, not just peer-based counsel, but superior counsel, whether it's professional counsel, like with the numbers that Bongs has put up here, which are helplines that are free. I believe most of them are free, with professionals who are trained to deal with issues, but also like even elders in your community, elders like literally from lecturers, teachers, potential mentors, pastors. Like I said, with me, it was my pastor that was a huge key in unlocking mental freedom. Seek that counsel as well, and seek it actively. But lastly, God's sake, do something about it.
Yeah.
You don't want to sit with vocab and information and you're the same person. Do something about it. Have enough ambition. Have enough ambition to change the direction of your life and the direction of the ones, the lives of the people who are around you.
Thank you so much for that, Tammy. Dumi, practical steps, next steps after watching this this episode.
Yeah. For me, the first step, we've spoken a lot about vulnerability. For me, vulnerability is always the first step, right? We spoke about and a willingness to be vulnerable, rather, not just vulnerability, a willingness to be vulnerable. We spoke a lot about shame, right? And I think shame could exist as another impediment that might stop the men who might be watching this from seeking assistance if they can't access a stranger therapist who doesn't know them and whose opinion about them they're not invested in. For anyone who might have to rely on an uncle or a father figure or a pastor, if you hold shame about how that person perceives you, you're not even going to get out the gate, So I think the first thing you have to accept, like, even if you hold shame and you're concerned about how a person whose opinion of you value and you cherish, and you hold dear to you, the first step you always have to make is assume just be willing to be vulnerable. Accept that this journey and this process is going to require you to be vulnerable. And if it's going to make any real change, if it's going to significantly remedy how you relate to your mind, how you relate to the people around you, and specifically for the purpose of this conversation, how you relate to women, then you have to be vulnerable. The second thing I would suggest is all of those things all of the things that weigh down on you, name them. Even if you can't identify a remedy, the first step, even when you can access a remedy, the first step, whether you're seeking therapy or you're trying to solve the issue on your own, you have to name those things, right? If it's jealousy, name it. If it is insecurity, name it. If it's shame, name it. Unpack all of those things that you feel, put them down on paper, explain them to yourselves, get them out of your own head and put them somewhere where you can see them, right? Because even if you're going to go to a therapist or psychiatrist and you have the means to do that, what are you going to say when you get there if you can't name those things, right? So I think the first thing, like I said, is accept the inevitability that you're going to have to be vulnerable. The second thing is name it, and then take it from there. And like I said earlier, as difficult as conversations like these are to find, because you might be someone who doesn't have, like Tammy said, progressive friends, conversations like this exist. We're proof that they exist, right?
Yeah.
Seek them out, because even if you have if you're struggling to name your experiences, conversations like this will help you do that, right? It's not about, when we say helping you find the language to express your experiences, we're not saying what we're saying is that like a lot of the time you can't get it out, right? Like it's stuck in your head. You know the way it feels, but you don't know what it means, right? And a lot of the time, drawing on a shared experience or drawing on an experience that somebody else has had can give you the ability to better understand your own experience, which is why therapy and talking and externalizing your feelings is so important in the first place, right? So yeah, I guess that would be the third thing. Seek out conversations and seek out engagements like this. And
beautiful,
you're on
beautiful,
your way.
Beautiful.
Alrighty, thank you so much for that, Dumi. I think on my part, I've largely been covered by the things that you guys have mentioned already, and I think they're quite powerful. Very practical steps on my part for any men who are struggling with mental health issues. The bravest thing you can do is, I think Tammy already pointed this out, is just admitting, or say something similar to it, is first of all, admit that there is something wrong. That's the first step. I mean, if you have a broken leg, before you can go to the doctor, or I mean, I'm assuming you've called the ambulance already, you need to be able to tell the doctor that something has happened to your leg. If you have a series of migraines that are happening over weeks and weeks, you need to be able to isolate the issue and point it out. And I think Dumi touched on this by saying you should name. I think I'll start by saying you should first point out that there's something wrong, and then start doing the work of naming these issues. A very useful technique that I discovered about a couple of years ago, one of my friends was seeing a therapist at the time. And I remember he started getting into the habit of, which I found weird at first because I've seen it on TV, but I'd never seen it in real life. He got into the habit of writing letters, right? He literally sit down and write letters. I remember he wrote a 2-page letter to me explaining, because at the time he was going through a very tough period. He wrote a 2-page letter to everyone in his life who either his mental health had affected or who affected his mental health. And then he wrote one big ass letter to his therapist, right? And this letter was very, very long.
Excellent.
And I found this so powerful because in that letter, parts of the letter were scathing attacks on me, but I wasn't offended. I read that and I was like, he's right. I am negligent. I am overlooking certain issues. I am triggering him. I am doing A, B, and C. And as a result of reading that letter, I was able to have a very, very constructive conversation with him. And we moved on in such a healthy way that didn't require us to fight and hate each other. And as a result, our friendship is stronger than it's ever been before. And I assume that his progress with his therapist ended up being a lot more fluid going forward. So I think one very practical step that I can give you guys, man, get into the habit of writing letters to the people who bother you, writing letters to people that you think you bother, and also writing a letter to your ideal therapist. So sit down, if you can't afford therapy, for example, sit down and try picture what your ideal therapist looks like, and then write a letter to your ideal therapist. And once you've done that, find figures in your life who could play the role of a therapist. And as both of you have mentioned, it might be a family member, it might be a mentor, it might be a pastor or appropriate religious leader, it might be a counselor that is available at work, at your religious institution, in your neighborhood. Once you've written that letter, take that letter to someone who you know has the potential to help you, and read out that letter to them. And I promise you, you have points of reference to work from going forward. So that's a very practical step.
Can I just add something to that?
Sure.
The pride, right?
Yes.
Because that's an example of somebody providing you with a valid criticism of your behavior, a valid criticism of the way you interact and orientate with them, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of the time, we know this is that men become abusive when their partners do this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So another
That's so
thing that you
true.
need to check is your pride. Yeah.
No, man, gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time today. This is a very constructive conversation, and I hope that to all the men who are watching out there, that you are really inspired to take action.
Yeah.
I really, I hope that you're inspired to walk out of here and take action. Firstly, admit that you have a problem, even if you don't have the language for that problem, as Dumi and Tamir pointed out. Speak to someone, and you will find the language through speaking to those people, through seeking counsel and working on those issues. So thank you so much for watching and listening in on this episode, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time on another topic. Just say bye to the peeps.
Bye, guys.
All right,
Much
they're flashing
love.
gang
Thanks,
signs.
gents.
They're flashing
Yeah,
gang
we should
signs.
stop that.
I don't know any. I don't
We're
know
all
any.
from different
Yeah,
parts
right.
of
This is
Joburg. So
this is it. This is the gang sign.
I'm from Alberton, Albertan. How do you do? I don't know.
Oh,
Bye.
that's